Takes a village to raise healthy and drug-free youth. Come on and thrive with us. And away we go. The KUAM News Decision 2020 candidate interviews. Starting now, we have incumbent Democrat Senator Clynt Ridgell. Good morning, Senator.
Hi, good morning, Chris. Good morning. Good morning, Sabrina.
We have Republican candidate and former Senator Joanne Brown. Good morning, Senator.
Hi, Chris and Sabrina. Jason, how are you? Good morning.
And then we have also on the Republican side of the ticket, he's the former chief of police during the Calvo Tenori administration, candidate J.I. Cruz. Good morning. Morning, Chief.
Good morning, Chris, Sabrina, Senator Ridgell, Senator Brown. Good morning, everybody.
And we'll go ahead and start the format, guys. We allow a 1 minute opening statement. We'll ask questions. You'll each have 2 minutes to respond to those questions. We will cut you when the time is up, and then we'll allow for a 2 minute closing statement. And so now we'll just jump into our 1 minute opens, and we'll start with the former police chief, J.I. Cruz, Republican candidate for senator. Chief, your 1 minute opening statement starts now.
Good morning, Guam. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank everybody during this election season for having me as their Republican senatorial candidate. I want to thank you for that. Thank you for your trust and confidence in having me as a candidate. And I hope to be able to serve the people of Guam as a senator in the 36th Guam legislature. What I bring to the table is I bring a career, I bring experience in the military, I bring experience in law enforcement, I bring education to the table, and I humbly ask for your vote on during this election season. Please vote number 8 on the Republican ballot, Joseph Iglesias, J.I. Cruz.
Thank you, Chief. And then we'll go to Senator Joanne Brown. Senator, your 1 minute opening statement starts now.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's very good to be with you this morning. One of the reasons that I'm primarily running is I'm just very dissatisfied with the leadership direction that I'm currently seeing in the Guam legislature, the lack of check and balance. And what I see is corruption in our government that is going unchecked and unreviewed by people in policy that continue to look the other way. So certainly after all these years of not being in the legislature, having previously served 6 terms, I certainly bring a whole wealth of experience, having been overall my government service for 30 years, including almost half that time heading agencies in this government, from EPA to DPW to the Port Authority of Guam. So I'm certainly looking forward, if I get the support of the people of Guam, to serve again in this upcoming legislature.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ridgell, your 1 minute open starts now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Clynt Ridgell. I'm running for re-election, number 9 on the Democratic ticket, and I'm running to focus on my platform, which is to make Guam green again. And what does that mean? People wonder, what does that mean? For me, what it means is returning to Guam's roots. And that means for thousands of years, the island of Guam and its people were self-sustainable. The people of Guam grew their own food. They didn't import anything. They created their own product. And I think during those times, they were very, very thriving. And I think we can return to a time when we're thriving again. That's why I want to focus on things like developing an agricultural industry, as well as other new industries on Guam. That's why I passed the Cannabis Industry Act to create a new industry on Guam. And that's why I also support things like renewable energy, and was able to pass, along with my colleagues, a bill that requires 100% renewable energy by 2045. There are other things I want to work on, but specifically agriculture is a big thing I want to work on developing.
Thank you, Senator. Chief, are you playing the Facebook stream? Because we're getting a lot of interference from your feed. So if you guys are going to watch the stream while we're on the Zoom, it's going to create some noise in the background.
Chris, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Sure
Do you have anything open?
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay. So we'll just jump into the first question, Sabrina.
Right. You guys have 2 minutes to respond to all the questions that we will present. The first one, I'll start it off. Please specify whether you have participated in the following surveys: the one from the Action PAC, the Progressive Democrats of Guam, which is due today, as well as the Vigilance Committee, which is due today. If you have not responded, if you could just explain why, and if you have, why you felt it was important too. And we will start with you, Senator Ridgell.
Sure. So the Action Pack survey, I did not respond to it. And the reason why is I felt it was unfair the way the questions were written, and they were yes or no answers. And those are not yes or no questions. So had they given an opportunity to allow for full answers, then I would have answered it. I did participate in the Vigilance Committee. I forget the exact name, but the Vigilance Organizations survey, because they allowed for full answers. So I gave my full answers, as well as the Progressives survey. They allowed full answers. Was there any other survey?
Those were the three that we were aware of.
Yeah.
To be honest, there's a lot. There's also a Guam Association of Realtors survey, which is very similar to the Action Pack survey.
Right.
Now, I didn't get the survey answers in on time, but I did participate in the Guam Association of Realtors forum that they held yesterday, which basically covered all the questions in their survey. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint. Chief?
Chief, you have 2 minutes
Good morning.
starting off.
I did answer the Action Pack survey. Again, I answered that because I felt that a lot of the questions that were being asked fall in line with my ideologies with regards to running for office, running for senator. I have formulated a response to the Progressive Democrats of Guam. I have yet to submit that. And I also answered the vigilance survey. Like Senator Ridgell had alluded to, there's a whole bunch of surveys that are out there. And again, I answered those two right off the bat because I think they align to my ideologies and my beliefs as far as running for a senator and what I look to effectuate in the 36th Guam legislature. I must admit, though, that the PDG survey kind of, for me as a Republican and as I look at things to effectuate, has a very interesting slant, almost the same slant that Senator Ridgell has about the PAC survey, the Action PAC survey. So I had to very carefully answer that survey so that it stays in line with my ideologies with regards to what I look to effectuate in the 36th Guam legislature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Brown?
With regards to the Action PAC, I did not participate. I did not participate in the Progressive Democrats, and I will be submitting my response today for the Vigilance Committee. I'm one of the founding members of the Vigilance Committee, but I had to step down several months ago, of course, when I declared my candidacy for the Guam legislature. You know, one of the things, in certainly having been involved in a number of elections to the Guam legislature, one of the things I'm always mindful of is making sure that when I run and as I did in the past, when I was fortunate enough to be elected, I mean, when I walk in the floor of the legislature, I'm not there representing any special interests. And sometimes I look at some of these questions, even though there are a number of surveys that I participated in this election. There are a number of these surveys that are very slanted and very much orientated, obviously, to the agenda of that particular organization. And so if I don't feel that really gives me an opportunity to elaborate on what my positions are and how I see issues, I just don't participate. And I'm really not someone who wants to be bought and sold the moment I walk on the floor of the legislature. I mean, I'm there to represent the people. There's some issues of these organizations I may agree with, but there may be others that I don't. And I certainly don't want to be put in a box, or have I ever sought? I do not have ever, nor have I ever in all the years I've run for office in the past, ever sought endorsements to represent any interests. I mean, I have to make sure when I'm there to represent the people's interest and review those issues as they come up, or certainly as if I'm elected again and fortunate enough, I'll represent those issues as they're brought forth. But I don't mind. I love the engagement, especially right now with our current pandemic situation. It allows us to interact. I am very appreciative of the forums that allow us actually to get on and Zoom and interact with organizations and their membership that allow us to elaborate. But my reason for not participating in those other two, I just felt they were very one-sided.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator
you,
Brown.
Senator. Next question. What letter grade from A through F would you give the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic? And we'll go ahead and keep it with you, Senator Brown. Your 2 minutes starts now.
You know, one thing I do know, certainly having spent a number of years in two administrations, because I've had the fortunate opportunity to work for two governors, Governor Joseph Atta and Lieutenant Governor Frank Blas, and of course, Governor Eddie Bazacalvo and Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio. The burdens of government are heavy. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. No matter who's in office, the challenge of of all the issues that you're faced with, and certainly with this pandemic, it's unprecedented for any organization, the government of Guam, to ever deal with anything of this magnitude. So just walking in, it's a tough job to begin with. I would give them maybe a low C. I mean, of course, people will just assume because we're in opposite parties, we're just going to say something negative. I think a lot of work's been done. A lot of work's been done by the healthcare professionals out there doing their work, trying to educate our people. And certainly we want to save as many of our people. It's unfortunate as we continue to look at the fatalities that we're experiencing. But I think one area they definitely need to work on is their public engagement, is making sure that they can get as much information out as possible. This whole issue, and I think it's wonderful that we have physicians in our community, certainly at this time, that want to give their advice and guidance, because it's definitely needed by the government, definitely needed by the governor, even though certainly she does have a healthcare background. But I think being more transparent in how that information, how those decisions are made, because right now, from one day to 1 week to the next, we don't know what's going to happen. And I can't imagine trying to operate a business, have employees, and even if I make every step that I need to make, I get penalized with everyone else. So I think that now, as we have more information, we should be making better educated decisions on how can we live with this pandemic, which doesn't seem like it's going to go away anytime in the near future, still function and keep our economy moving, because I really feel that that's an area where we're getting hit very severely, and we're going to have a very hard time recovering from it.
Thank you, Senator. Chief, you got 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now. Unmute.
Sir.
I'm sorry, can you hear me, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good question, Chris. And I would say I would echo the sentiments of Senator Brown. I too would give this administration a low C, a C minus, with regards to the way they've been handling the pandemic. And I say that from that perspective, in that I know that the Physicians Advisory Group was very key and instrumental in providing information. And there were many other advisory groups and councils that were giving advice to the administration. But I'm not too sure, I'm not very confident that they came up with some kind of a plan to be able to deal with the virus moving forward. And I'm not sure that they reached out to the healthcare professionals stateside and other jurisdictions who are facing similar, if not the same type of situations on Guam. And then on top of that, like Senator Brown had alluded to, communicating that to the public, I think, is where there could have been room for that. And while I understand that there's no 100% foolproof plan, but there could have been decision points along the way so that as the dynamic of the virus continued to change, that the plan could continue to change as well. And again, that's a perspective that I see, that there was no real plan going forward, whether it's from the healthcare perspective, whether it's from the business perspective, whether it's from the government perspective, there was no real plan going forward. And I think that the transparency that needed to be added to that, so that the people were comfortable that the government was doing everything that it possibly could to deal with this situation, would have helped to deal with this. So again, I think that as we go forward, that's part of what we need to consider: developing a plan, being able to have a plan that's flexible enough so that we can adjust accordingly, and communicating that to the people of Guam.
Thank you, Chief. Senator Ridgell, your 2 minutes starts now.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a different grade. I actually give them an A. And I know some people might think, oh, wow, that's crazy, you gave them an A. I don't care, I'm being honest. This is a very, very difficult thing to handle. And I say point out one jurisdiction around the world that has been able to handle this virus successfully. Look across the United States. The United States has like the highest numbers of coronavirus right now. Countries are banning travel to the US. The president of the United States, the most powerful country in the world, the president got airlifted to the hospital and pumped full of experimental drugs and pushed back out there. How well are they handling the virus, you know? I don't think anyone's handling the virus that well, because it's so brand new, it's so difficult, no one really knows what to do. Everyone is just doing the best we can with the information as it becomes available. There's new information almost every week as science begins to unravel the details surrounding this disease. There are new, in the beginning, we thought it was just a few symptoms. Now the symptoms run the gamut. There's so much information it's hard to keep up with what exactly should be done. And in fact, public health policies are constantly shifting across the globe, depending on the country you're in and depending on what their experts and their leaders decide to do. So it's a very dynamic and very difficult situation. But I think overall that our government and our governor has done the best that she can with the resources we have and with the information we have regarding something that's brand new and something that's affecting the entire global landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Wow. Some, during this pandemic, brings to light, some people have said, it's turned out where we've seen government employees versus private sector employees. And what I mean by that is that, government employees, they've been allowed to stay home. They've been allowed to telework, and they continue to get paid. While you have private sector employees, they also have had to stay home, but some of them have been furloughed. Some have been laid off and seen a reduction in hours. Explain how you will be a leader for the people of Guam and not just the government of Guam, and provide relief to the private sector and private sector employees.
And we'll start with former Senator Joanne Brown. You have 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now.
Thank you very much, Chris and Sabrina, for that question. I'm troubled with that as well. And even though certainly I've had my career in the government of Guam, and we do have a lot of good, hardworking government employees, I think this pandemic has brought to light how removed the government of Guam is from the people in general. The fact that we do have needs of the government and people have requests for information, we still need to facilitate and function, of course, do it in a safe manner. But if we're able to do it in many operations of the government, even in our community, there's no reason why we can't reassign other employees from departments and agencies that are considered non-essential to assist in areas where support is needed. And of course, contact with each other and the general public can be addressed, because we're doing that now. I mean, you guys are doing that in your studio. Every early morning you come to work, you're taking the necessary steps that you need to do to continue to do your work. I mean, gosh, that would be nice to stay home and get paid and not have to go to work. But when our community is suffering as it is, when we have so many people in the private sector that are losing their jobs or have lost their jobs and don't have an income coming in, and the federal money will dry up one way or the other. We're waiting in between to see, is Congress going to do another relief effort or whatever the case may be? But it shows you that the priority is not focused on protecting the government. Even when the administration makes public comments, oh yes, we have enough revenue. We have enough revenue to keep the government operating. No, we don't have to reduce government spending. No, we don't have to impact compensation to our employees. That sounds good, but that's not the reality of what's going on in the real world. And I think we see right now, I'm dumbfounded with the most recent budget. How could it be possible? We're almost passing a budget of $1 billion on an economy where such a significant portion of it has come to an economic standstill. And without that, getting that private sector moving, again, to generate those revenues, the downfall's coming. It's coming next year, and it's coming right after that, where we're going to feel the severe impacts.
Thank you, Senator.
Where those cuts, instead of
Thank you, Senator.
managing it properly.
Thank you.
We'll move on to former Chief J.I. Chief, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now.
Thank you, Chris. That's a very good question. And I would tell you the perspective I would take is the same perspective that I took when I was the chief of police. And that perspective is considering the whole of the community, and that you cannot just consider one facet of the community called the government of Guam, or one facet of the community called the private sector. You need to look at it from a holistic point of view, and that all facets of the community need to be considered. And as a senator in the legislature, that needs to be considered. We need to look at and think about that. And Senator Brown alluded to some of that by considering those who have been affected by the pandemic, where they're unemployed or underemployed because of that. What can be done to be able to effectuate that so that they're not so underemployed? And how can we encourage businesses to open back up and continue to be able to serve our people? We talk about revenue projections and the shortfalls in the budget. Again, like Senator Brown had alluded to, I question the budget because of the fact that the projections are short. They're not meeting the mark. And if we don't look at the whole of the community and how that impacts everybody across the board, not just the government employee, because the government will not stand alone on its own, and not just the private sector and those who have shut down and those unemployed or underemployed, because you cannot thrive on federal assistance alone. We as a government a legislature need to take a look at that and figure out what we can introduce, what can be introduced to be able to help everybody in the community, not just the government of Guam, who have a relative sense of security, job security, but all parts of that, our community. So I would say that we need to take a holistic approach, consider all facets of community, and be able to implement policy that's going to affect the whole spectrum. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Senator Ridgell, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely a challenge is going to be the economy and how do we help businesses and help the economy recover. But I do think that the government of Guam has been doing a lot. And with the budget that was brought up, we actually cut $60 million from the governor's budget. In fact, she vetoed the budget because we cut so much, and we had to override the veto. So I think we have been doing everything we can to cut and reduce spending as much as possible during this pandemic. In addition to that, the government has given out thousands of dollars through federal funds that have come through, but has facilitated those federal funds to private businesses through GITA, through various grants and loans and other programs. And quite a lot of money has gone out. The pandemic unemployment has put out a lot of money to those who unfortunately lost their jobs. Again, this is something that's very difficult to deal with. I mean, what we could open up the economy, right? We could open everything up, let all the stores open, let everything open. Then what happens if the virus runs through our community and fills our hospital to the point where our hospital can't handle it anymore, right? So we got to do something. You either pick opening everything up or you close some things down. We've had to close some things down to manage it, to keep it at a manageable level. And that's what we've done. And I know not everyone's happy with that, but there's not too many other alternatives unless you want more deaths on your hands, unless you want the death toll to rise. That's the only other alternative. And I think we've decided to keep the death toll as low as possible. And because of that, there's going to be some businesses that are going to have to just find ways to deal with it and apply for these programs that offer more funding. And there's a lot of federal programs that have offered a lot of that funding. And that's the best we can do at this time. And then look towards how do we get the island out of this COVID mess, get the COVID numbers down so we can reopen.
Thank you, Senator. Next question. Several candidates are running on a platform of fighting corruption that they say is going on in this administration. So please cite at least one example of corruption and how you would address that corruption through legislation or your role as a senator. And we'll go ahead and start with former Senator Joanne Brown. You have 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now.
Thank you very much, Chris, and I appreciate that question because certainly that's one of the main issues that I'm looking at. Certainly, should I be elected to the Guam legislature? And having been served in the Guam legislature, I've been a 6-term senator. I've served, like I said, overseeing 3 departments in this government of significant size and purpose. And I'm aware, you can look at the most recent situation that's happened this year at the Port Authority of Guam. Senator Ridgell is the oversight chair. A lot of people probably don't know that because I haven't even heard anything publicly with regards to over $3 million of public and ratepayer money being paid out to employees that did not fully go through the legal process to ensure that public monies were being protected. And I mentioned that when this administration started last year, because I started seeing the signals of what the agenda was. The agenda was to walk in and pay these people off. And here we are all these months later. And that's exactly what happened. This type of stuff going on that's going unchecked because of who knows who and who's connected to who and abusing public assets and public money and public resource, particularly during this time of challenge and suffering that our people are going through is not right. And certainly should we get elected, hopefully the people of Guam give us a Republican majority. If they're dissatisfied out there with the current leadership, then by all means, put different people out there and put me and my colleagues in there on the Republican side, because certainly one of the things we will do is create a committee specifically to look at allegations and issues of corruption and bring those issues to light in the people's house, because let's not kid ourselves. Our people are very much aware, but I think those issues need to be brought to light and appropriate action needs to be taken. If there's no doubt in my mind, there's been abuse of public resource that has happened. But at the other end, I think that information needs to be brought out and the people of Guam need to see it and hear it for themselves and then make that determination as to whether the people in leadership who continue, Chris and Sabrina and Jason, to look the other way Let them make that determination on their own when the
Thank you,
information is
Senator.
brought to light. and they're
Thank you,
aware of it.
Senator. Next, Chief, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now.
Chris, can I go since my name was mentioned?
Yeah, we
So
can
I
switch it
move
up.
on?
Okay. So we'll go with Senator Ridgell. You have 2 minutes to respond to the question or to former Senator Brown, whatever you choose.
Thank you. Yeah.
Starting
thank
now.
you. So with regards to the Port Authority of Guam, right? These, I believe she's referring to employees that were reinstated. Now they did go through a process. Those employees, there are processes in place. They went to the Civil Service Commission. In fact,
That's
some of these
totally
went to the,
incorrect, Chris. What
some of these
he's
went-
saying,
some
I'll
of
tell you,
these
I'm not
went
here
to
to
the-
debate.
Senator
but that
Brown,
is totally
Senator
incorrect.
Brown, Senator Brown,
some of these
Senator
went to the
Brown.
court system. And the court, so these went to the civil service, they went to the court system, they were reinstated. That's why they were paid. They were told to be reinstated by the courts and Civil Service Commission.
Is that it? You still have a minute 20.
Yeah, sure. What was the question?
Cite at least one example of corruption and how you would fight it with legislation or in your role as a senator.
Sure. So legislation, I don't think it's an issue of legislating against corruption. It is an issue of oversight and monitoring against corruption and ensuring that you catch corruption and find corruption and point it out. And I think I've done my best to do a lot of that. I think a lot of people didn't, the media included, didn't make a big deal about my push against the power plant. There's a reason why there's a push against the power plant, because here's a power plant worth $3 billion. You want to talk about money figures now, some petty 3 million versus $3 billion of a power plant. That power plant was given to a company who blew up the old power plant at Cabris. That's how I fight corruption, is I look for these things that don't smell right and I go after them. Unfortunately, the power plant deal went through and it didn't smell good to me. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Senator. Chief, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question or anything else you want to respond to. Starting now.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the question. And I see corruption as one of those matters that come in many shapes and sizes, many forms and fashions. But I will tell you that the biggest way that I see to be able to deal with that is providing transparency. There's got to be transparency. There has to be a mechanism that deals with the issue of corruption. Now, again, I take it from the perspective that these things need to be brought to light. When I was the chief of police, we had an internal affairs section, and there were many different mechanisms in place to deal with those types of things. When you ask the question, give one description of corruption, I would think that, again, the use of the people's money and how the money's being spent in recent months. And I think the procurement of how things were bringing things into the government to be used as a result of what's been happening since the pandemic. I question some of that from somebody who's on the outside looking in. And as far as legislation is concerned, I think that we need to introduce legislation that mandates periodic reporting of different agencies across the board. So, and again, being the former chief, I understand what that process, or I can see how that would serve to be able to bring more transparency and mitigate the issue of corruption. Oversight is another issue, and Senator Ridgell led to that. Should I make it into the 36th Guam legislature, then I would definitely look into mandating the periodic reporting of these agencies across the board, so that we can see, and working with the OPA, so that we can see that how they're spending the money that belongs to the people is being spent accordingly. And then providing oversights where, like Senator Ridgell said, if it doesn't smell right, we need to oversight these agencies and ensure that kind of transparency. And that's how I would deal with this issue of corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Sabrina?
Speaking of transparency, the Department of Public Health, they will not release information about businesses that have had or have COVID positive cases, but they do release businesses that have undergone COVID inspections, and when they find violations. It's on there, it lists, it's public. But again, when it comes to businesses that have COVID cases, they just won't let the public know. Do you feel the public has a right to know? And we'll start with you, Senator Ridgell.
Yes, I actually do. I think they should. I'm not sure why they're not. And that is a part that I have had problem with. Definitely, is that it seems inconsistent over when they say who's got COVID and who doesn't, or which businesses. And now I know it gets complicated sometimes with HIPAA regulations, and I'm not very well versed on the HIPAA regulations, but it does seem inconsistent when some businesses, like you said, they'll say that they've violated COVID regulations, but then they won't say who has it. So maybe that's where it gets dicey, is because technically, if you say where someone has it, then you might be indicating who has it, and that might be a violation of HIPAA. I'm not sure. Versus someone who violated public health guidelines is different. It's not necessarily a personal health issue that's regulated by HIPAA. I'm not an expert on that, but I would like to see more clarity and have it be fair. And I do think people should know if a business has a lot of people infected, and a lot of businesses have just come out and said it. So yes, I do think people should know if a business has people that were infected, so that at least people can decide for themselves if they want to go. You don't have to say who at the business was infected, but just to know that there were infections at the business, then the public can decide if they want to go there or not and risk it.
Chief, we'll go with you next. You have 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now.
To answer your question directly, Chris, I would agree. There needs to be that level of transparency. I will tell you that I find out more from my WhatsApp chat rooms about what public or private businesses have employees who have tested positive for COVID than anywhere else. I mean, that's how pretty much we're getting that information. Why? Because we're not hearing from the right authorities as to that. Now, I agree with Senator Ridgell that that HIPAA comes into play, and that we can't violate those HIPAA regulations. But at the same time, I think that there needs to be a mechanism, which goes back to that planning question that I talked about. There needs to be some kind of a plan to move forward on how we deal with these types of things. How do we get this information out to the people? So like you said, Chris, the people can make their own decision about who they decide to, what private businesses they decide to go to. But if we don't get that information out to the people, we don't maintain that transparency, how are we going to know? But then again, it goes back to that, do we have some kind of a plan to deal with that? And I don't think we do. And that we need to give as much information as we can regarding this matter to the people so that the people can decide. It's the people's government. And that's who we need to be answerable to. And that's who we need to keep informed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next question. What could be done to...
Wait, did Senator Brown answer?
Oh, Senator Brown. I'm sorry, Senator Brown. Okay, Senator Brown.
No problem, Chris.
You have 2 minutes.
I agree. I think there needs to be a process of keeping the people informed. And I certainly appreciate a lot of the businesses out there that have been proactive in announcing that they have had a case or cases and what step they've taken to mitigate it. So that people are aware. I mean, I think, the healthcare professionals keep telling us that assume everyone around you has it and act accordingly. Make sure you wash your hands, make sure you wear your mask, make sure you maintain social distance. But I do agree that the public health and the government in general has been inconsistent in one area. They're very well open to announce, for example, one of the churches. We all know who that church is early on because their names were used quite often. And then in other cases, like the healthcare clinics, when they had positive cases of employees in their healthcare clinics and the hospital, they didn't announce it. I mean, I know the Vigilance Committee actually pursued that to finally make that information public, but they were not providing that. So that type of inconsistency, that's what makes the people leery about their own government, because the government's not consistent in providing that information. I think every step we take to keep people informed, and then they can make their own decision. Do they want to go and be a customer to that business? That's their choice. Because I know everyone is struggling with this, but as mentioned, I think the more transparent, the more open we are with our people, hey, we got to give them credit. They can make really informed decisions, but we need to assist and facilitate and make sure that information's out there so that they know what to do. So I'm very much that information should be provided to the public.
Thank you, Senator. Next question. Could the Guam legislature have done more during this pandemic? Many have been critical about the legislature remaining silent, but in your opinion, do you think they could have done more, or did they do enough? And we'll go ahead and start with incumbent Senator Ridgell. Senator, you have 2 minutes. to respond to the question.
The answer is we can always do more. It's never enough, no matter what. So, of course, there's always room for improvement. We can always do more, but I think we've done a lot. We've been in session like almost every other week. We're going to session next week, by the way. We've been during the pandemic. We were in session. A few weeks after the pandemic, we were in numerous special sessions. We've addressed as many bills as we could come up with. There's only so much you can do from a policy standpoint in the midst of a pandemic, because really a pandemic requires a lot of executive response. As a policymaker, we just have to come up with policies that can help the executive branch execute things that would overall help the island and help the economy. So it's a bit limited in what a legislative body can do, but I think we've done the best we can. Like I said, we cut spending. In addition to that, we found ways to fund other things, and we just did our best, to get through this pandemic. It is a very challenging thing, and I know some people wish we would have been perhaps they say more vocal. I think we did a lot. We did stand up, as a matter of fact. The governor, when she wanted to pass a bill that would have created the roadblocks, we voted it down. There was another one that would have put stricter penalties on people breaking COVID rules. I forgot the exact penalties. We voted that down as well. So I think we have been the checks and balances. And I think it's a misnomer to think that we've just rubber stamped everything the governor sent down. We have not. We've actually sat there and said, no, this is too far. This is not good. Sorry, Gov, we're not going to allow this to go through. So I think we have done our part. Thank you. Thank
you, Senator. Senator Brown, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question or to whatever. Starting now.
Certainly I'm not in the inside of the legislature and have not been for a number of years. So from my perspective of where I'm at, I think the current legislature has failed to be as engaged with the public as they need to be. I've been in many sessions. I've been in sessions till the sun came up the following morning. So I have that experience. And I think this current legislature has not been as engaged. I sense that out in the community when I meet people and they approach me and want to talk about the politics of what's going on. For example, like addressing the business privilege tax and giving some relief to the private sector. I mean, this current legislature could have gone into session any day of the week, any time of the day or night to address some of those really pressing issues. And they've not done that. I mean, yes, the federal government, but that money's drying up and there are limits to how many of our people that could be helped with that. This current legislature, in my estimate, and I can speak from a point of experience, because right now, aside from Robert Underwood, time-wise, I'm the second oldest politician in terms of politics running for office right now. The lack of check and balance by this current legislature and engagement to ensure that services are being provided, even within their oversights. Each of these senators that have oversights right now in the majority could be going out there having oversights hearings to find out, is the government being as efficient as it can? Are we restructuring the government so that we can use the government resources, employees that we have that are from so-called non-essential agencies? Can we move them and assist in facilitating so that they can do things to help or assist the public in a better way while we're going through these challenges? I don't see it and I don't hear it. So I'm not going to say, oh, well, they're doing a great job, because I really think that, and we'll know in a few weeks, everyone, whether or not the people of Guam are satisfied with the current leadership that they see. But that's one of the reasons I'm running after all these years, is because I'm so disappointed with the leadership direction, the lack of check and balance, the lack of transparency and accountability in our government that I believe our people deserve.
Thank you, Senator. Chief, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question starting now.
Thank you, Chris. And I think that's a very good question. I'm going to be very critical about the 35th Guam legislature. And while I never served as a senator in the legislature, I have served as a director, as an executive in the government of Guam. And I see that what's happening here, and I'm going to use a figure of speech, that this would have been the time to shine for the 35th Guam legislature. This is when, at the onset of this issue, they should have been having Zoom meetings, Google Meet meetings, whatever kind of meetings you could have had to figure out how to try and deal with this, to be able to come up with some kind of solution and look at it from a holistic point of view, not just from the government of Guam standpoint, but how is this going to affect the entire government? And as time elapsed, as things went on, we saw how this impacted the government. this impacted the people of Guam. This impacted the private businesses. And again, being critical, I don't think that enough has been done by the 35th Guam legislature to be able to effectuate that and to be able to address some of those issues. That business privilege tax could have been one way to be able to get micro businesses, small businesses, and business in general to want to stay open, so that we don't have 34,000 people plus unemployed or underemployed. And the checks and balances. Again, I go back to that transparency question. You know, I question about some of the procurement that's been going on, going to certain peoples in the community instead of going through that process of ensuring that it's done fairly across the board. So again, I think that more could have been done. And I use that proverbial saying that this would have been their opportunity to meet in the virtual space, come up with solutions, come up with a plan, and push that to Adelup and force the issue, because that's what the people of Guam have them there in place. So I think more can be done, and I'm very critical about that, and I look to be very critical should I make it into the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Bree?
Wow, that was a lot. During the pandemic, and Chief, you kind of brought it up, and just remembered the road we went down when this all went down, and it was the governor citing her Emergency Health Powers Act superpowers, and we saw an oversight hearing where the Attorney General was basically pleading the fifth, because he was representing the governor and providing advice in terms of how we paid out, or federal funds, I'm not sure what money at this point, was used to pay the quarantine hotels. And there was no contract. There were some agreements, but some of those agreements weren't even signed. And all we heard about was this letter that was written to the Department of Administration to pay it. And yet, we haven't seen anything since that oversight hearing. Do we need to changes with the procurement law? I know Senator Sabina Perez introduced a bill, but what changes do you think are needed with our procurement laws? And we'll start with you, Senator Brown.
Thanks very much for Sabrina for that question. I think a lot of people, that issue raised quite a few eyebrows, because this is the first time we're dealing with a pandemic of this type. This is not the first time we're having to deal with emergency procurement of the government. We've had other natural disasters that the government of Guam, through the Office of Homeland Security and Civil Defense, have had to respond to. And our people, of course, of the things we know well, certainly typhoon recovery, we have that down. But the whole process of how this came to be and it came to light just raised a lot of questions. Why did that need to be done through the governor's office? Why didn't Homeland Security be the one, and their key people that are very well versed on how to deal with emergency response? Why weren't they involved in properly overseeing that? Because had that happened, everyone knows you're going to have to address emergency procurement because of the circumstance, but none, a lot of these questions that make you wonder, was this done properly? Was there special interest involved, especially when you're dealing with this kind of money? And also, yes, of course, the legislature is not in charge, as they say, of overseeing the expenditure of federal funds in this emergency, but more the reason for the administration to provide that information publicly so that there's transparency, so everyone knows, hey, that's how the money's getting spent, and it's getting spent in the right way, rather than this, oh my goodness, they've got millions and millions of dollars, but they're not telling the people of Guam how that money's being spent because they don't have to. I think that's the wrong message to send out there, especially when we're going through trying times. And the worst part is to think that during this pandemic, when people are suffering, when people's freedoms and liberties because of this pandemic are being adversely impacted, when we see this kind of stuff going on, that's the kind of stuff. Where's the Guam legislature again? Where's the check and balance to find out how the procurement was done, and was it being done properly? And was the money that's intended for the people being given to the people in the right way? Had that been done, I don't think we would have ended up with all that controversy. Until this day, I don't have the answers. I bet a lot of our people out there in the community don't have those answers. And that's the type of question.
Thank you, Senator Brown.
That the legislature should be involved in.
Chief.
Thank you, Sabrina. And Sabrina, that's a very good question. And when it comes to procurement, we all know in the government of Guam that there is a procurement process. And even with emergency procurement, regardless of the situation, whatever the emergency is, there's still a process that needs to be followed. And that, Sabrina, I question. That whole issue of the quarantine facilities and how that was being run, how that was being procured, I agree with you. So we still don't know. I think, like you had alluded to, maybe there's one letter that got put out. So again, there is a process that's in place. There is a procurement process in place. While I think it needs to be streamlined, I think we need to take a look at that process, even on the emergency procurement piece, but there's still that process, and being able to communicate that to the people of Guam so that we are aware of how this money is being spent, even if it's the federal government's money, regardless. I think that kind of transparency, and we've talked about that time and time again, that needs to be made available. And just saying that, you know, the administration doesn't have to justify that to the people of Guam, I think is wrong. And I think, again, we need to be critical about that, and that we need to follow this process. Whatever the process is, follow that process, and then all is well, and communicate that so that the people of Guam are aware of that. I think that that's where the legislature could have stepped in that regard, and stepped in and said, this current administration, how is this money being spent and why? Are we going through those checks and balances, like Senator Brown said? So I think that we need to take a look at that. We need to be critical about that process. And whether it's an emergency procurement or not, there is still a process. And I personally question that. Many people who I've spoken to question that. And I think that those questions still need to be answered by this administration. Thank you.
Senator Ridgell.
Yes, so on the question of procurement, Senator Sabina Perez did hold an oversight hearing. I'm not the oversight of procurement, but she did hold an oversight hearing, and she did ask a lot of questions, and there were answers given. If this is specific to things like the quarantine facility, if you're talking about Pacific Star, let's just get straight to the point. If people are concerned about Pacific Star,
It was actually all of them.
Okay, well, GHRA went on the record and said that, yes, someone in the administration reached out to them and said, hey, can you talk to your members and see who would like to be a quarantine facility? The answer GHRA got back was crickets. No one wanted to be a quarantine facility, especially at the beginning of the COVID crisis, when no one knew what COVID was. No one knew how infectious it was. No one knew how bad it was. So they had a hard time finding any takers. Eventually, they went back out to their members of the GHRA and finally got some takers, and those takers are the ones who eventually were given the procurement for that. Now, if there were mistakes made and how they did, there probably were. I'm not too familiar with the entire process and what happened. And of course, there was a lot of back and forth going on between who said what in an email. Well, that all needs to be fleshed out for sure. And if someone did something wrong, then they should absolutely be held accountable for it. And as was mentioned before, this is federal money, so I'm certain the feds will hold them accountable for it. And I believe the public auditor is going to be auditing all of the federal funds that have come through as well. I believe he's said that before. As a part of the CARES Act, he's gonna audit the money and how it was spent, and also put that report out to the people.
Thank you, Senator. It's now time for our 2-minute closing statement, and we'll keep it with the incumbent Senator Clynt Ridgell. Your 2-minute closing statement starts now.
Thanks. And thank you very much for having me, and you're welcome for being here. Thank you. So first of all, I'd just like to say I'm running for re-election. These are tough times. These are very difficult times. I know a lot of people at home are dissatisfied with the way things are going, and I don't blame you for being dissatisfied, because these are difficult times. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and there's a lot of uncertainty for us too as senators as well. And as leaders, there's tons of uncertainty. We don't know everything about the coronavirus, and we don't know exactly what the future will hold. But what we do know, and what I know, is that I will do my best and work my hardest to come up with solutions, to come up with real solutions, and to figure a way out of this. Now, right now, my priorities are this. First, we have to get COVID under control so that we can get our island healthy again. Then the next step is to work on the economy. And my platform is designed specifically with the economy in mind, specifically diversification of the economy. And that's why agriculture is a big part of my platform. Agriculture is a big part of my platform because I believe it's time we start growing and producing our own food. Imagine if we import 90% of our food. Imagine if we just grew 50% of our own food. Imagine the jobs we would create, the businesses we would create, the revenues we would create, and imagine all that revenue staying on island instead of going off island to companies like Tyson Chicken, who certainly don't need our money anymore. So please vote for me. I will do my best. I will work my hardest. I know that these are challenging times and people aren't satisfied with everything we've done. And we're not perfect. We're trying to figure out how to solve these issues as well. There's a million issues to deal with, but I will do my best. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chief, 2-minute closing statement starts now.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sabrina. Thank you to the people of Guam. Like I had mentioned earlier, thank you for having me as a Republican senatorial candidate. And what I bring to the table, what I bring to the people of Guam as one of their elected leaders, as a senator in the 36th Guam legislature, is over 30 years of experience. Experience in the United States military, experience in the government of Guam, experience in law enforcement, experience, executive level experience, leading the Guam Police Department. I bring education to the table as well. And as I look to do that, I do that for one reason: to effectuate positive social change in our community. That's what I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to the downside or take that lower road on this. I'm looking to how can we move our island forward to effectuate that positive social change. Now, my platform is built on 5 things. The first and foremost is our economy. This virus has taken our economy and just shot it down. So we need to get our economy going. We need to get businesses to open back up. We need to get our 34,000 people plus who are unemployed or underemployed back to work so that they can put food on the table, they can pay their bills, and they can continue to thrive and not just exist, because it's not enough to exist on federal government. We need to thrive. Now, once the economy, we get our economy going in that direction where we're on an upward glide path, then of course I'm going to look at what I call the 3 pillars of government: health, safety, and education. And as a former chief of police, obviously I'm looking at what I can do to make things better from a public safety perspective, from a public health perspective, and from a public education perspective. And as a veteran, having served over 22 years in the military, I know what our veterans are dealing with, and I see it myself. And I want to be able to help out our veterans to be able to
Thank you, Chief.
change
Thank you,
for them
Chief.
in a positive direction
Thank you,
as
Chief.
well.
All right.
I asked for your
Chief, thank you, Chief. Okay. Last 2 minutes. Former Senator Brown, you have 2 minutes to issue your closing statement starting now.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, KUAM, Fred, and all of you there for giving us the opportunity to be able to engage in the public and have them get an idea of what it is that's important to us and why we're running, and hopefully why we would like them to give us the opportunity to serve again. You know, I've been in government for many years, and I definitely have the experience walking in. And there's a specific reason why I'm running. I want to see accountability back in our government. I want to see our government be free of corruption that I so flagrantly see happening these days. That's why I'm running again. I don't think you can build on this government and address the issues of healthcare, education, building our roads and our schools that we need and that our people want out there unless you address the foundation of corruption that does exist in our government. I mean, I've already been attacked. I've been slandered. I've had truths made about me and my career and my public service to the people. But I'll tell you, I've always been a fighter. I will continue to be a fighter, and I will continue to fight these issues because it's the right thing to do. If the people of Guam are dissatisfied with, as I see it, with the current leadership that exists in this government now, and they want to change and they want a better direction, by all means, please give me your vote. I'm number 2 on the Republican side of the ballot. And I'm also going to ask, because you know what? One person can't do it by themselves. If you really want to see a change and you're dissatisfied with the current Democratic leadership in the Guam legislature and what you're seeing in the administration, then by all means, please vote on the Republican side of the ballot and help my fellow colleagues and candidates that are running. Because if you want to see that change, you're going to see that change if you put us back in. And if we're fortunate enough, we'll continue to do what we need to do to serve our people. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been good to talk to you and certainly also to hear from our fellow candidates that are also running this morning. So thank you. And I hope everyone has a good and safe weekend.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Ridgell. No time limit on saying goodbye.
Let's go. Goodbye? I
Yeah,
didn't
we
know.
say bye. That's it, yeah.
I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me as well.
You're welcome too.
Thank you.
Have a safe weekend.
Thank you. Thank you
You
very
too.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a
Un
safe
dom
weekend.
pluna si Zeus maasi Chris and Sabrina. Then todo mi familia KOAM. Si Zeus maasi. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, there you go. Get the point. They're thankful. They're thankful for this, guys.
Hey, I'm thankful too because I
Yeah.
want to hear from them, and I think people out there want to hear from them too.
Let me just tell you, the
This
big
election's been hard.
these are some big guns out here. This, Senator Ridgell, Chief J.I., Joanne, they definitely want it, and it's good. We had a comment in here about passion.